Fit a nut into each of the hexagonal recesses in the two shaft fixing bases. Position one base so that the nuts are over the holes at the top right of the main frame. Insert and tighten two bolts through the main frame and into the nuts. Insert one end of the first Z shaft into the socket in the upper fixing base, then slip another base over the bottom of the shaft. Insert and tighten two bolts through the main frame and into the nuts. Undo the two bolts and nuts to release a lower shaft fixing base from the Z shaft, then put these aside. With the two brass sockets positioned inwards, slide the Z-axis bearing block onto the Z shaft and reattach the fixing base. Reattach the fixing base to the main frame with two bolts and nuts. Check that the linear bearing blocks slide smoothly on the shaft. Fit a nut into each of the hexagonal recesses in the two shaft fixing bases. Position one base so that the nuts are over the holes at the outer top left of the main frame. Insert and tighten two bolts through the main frame and into the nuts. Insert one end of the second Z shaft into the socket in the upper fixing base, then slip another base over the bottom of the shaft. Insert and tighten two bolts through the main frame and into the nuts. Fit a shaft fixing base to the inner top left of the main frame with two nuts and bolts. Insert the third Z shaft into the upper fixing base and slip another base over the bottom of the shaft. Insert and tighten two bolts through the main frame and into the nuts. Undo the four bolts and nuts to release the lower fixing bases from the second and third Z shafts, then put these aside. Take the Z-axis linear bearing block. With the two brass sockets outwards and the protruding switch trigger downwards, slide both of the Z shafts through the block and refit the two fixing bases. Reattach the fixing bases to the main frame with the bolts and nuts that you set aside. Check that the linear bearing block slides smoothly on the two shafts. If the bearing block does not slide smoothly, slacken and adjust the bolts in the elongated holes of the outer fixing bases. Slide the block up and down, then retighten all 4 bolts. Wait for the next issue before fitting the Z-axis motor. Take the motor coupling and use a 2mm Allen key to loosely insert 4 grub screws. Slide the coupling onto the shaft of the Z-axis motor. Align one of the lower grub screws with the flat surface of the shaft and tighten it. Then tighten the second of the lower grub screws onto the rounded surface of the shaft. Fit the motor bracket over the motor with the angled side away from the wires. Fix the bracket firmly with 4 bolts into the motor. Align the limit switch between the 2 jaws on the limit switch holder with the switch toggle roller to the right. Press the switch firmly down into the jaws and onto the 2 support pins. Feed the switch wires through the hole in the main frame beneath the second and third Z shafts. Align the switch holder so that the toggle roller faces inwards beneath the trigger on the bearing block above. Then fit the motor bracket over the switch holder with the motor wires outwards. Fix firmly with 4 bolts through both the motor bracket and switch holder. Check that the bearing block triggers the limit switch toggle correctly. Screw the brass screw rod fixing block onto the screw rod to about 1/4 to 1/3 of its length. Fit the screw rod fixing block into the centre of the Z-axis bearing block, then slide the screw rod down into the motor coupling. Use a 2mm Allen key to secure both of the upper grub screws into the coupling. Use leverage with the longest arm of the Allen key to give the grub screws a final tighten. Using a cotton wool bud, apply plenty of grease to the full length of the screw rod.